Tonight on Ukraine Today, massive attack on Ukraine. There are people killed and wounded, among them children. Critical damage to energy infrastructure. Operational encirclement in Myrnohrad. What does it mean for Ukrainian troops and what is happening on other parts of the front line? A grim forecast from Budanov. When and under what conditions could Putin's army attack the Baltic states and strike Poland? The Kremlin versus Starlink. Is Russia really developing weapons capable of destroying the satellites in space? All this and more, right now. Hello, I'm Volodymyr and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and let's get to the news. Let's start with a massive attack on Ukraine. The occupiers struck Kyiv and the Kyiv region, Zhytomyr, Odessa and Khmelnytsky regions. Explosions were also reported in Sumy, Dnipro, Rivne, Chernihiv, Cherkasy regions and in the Carpathian area. The enemy used drones and missiles. Apartment buildings and private homes were damaged, along with civilian businesses, energy facilities, maritime port and transport infrastructure. A civilian cargo vessel was hit as well. Sadly, there are people killed and injured. Children are among the victims. Consumers in three regions, Rivne, Ternopil and Khmelnytsky, were almost completely left without electricity. Power outages were also reported in parts of Vinnytsia, Chernihiv, Zhytomyr, Donetsk, Dnipro and Kharkiv regions. And all of this just days before Christmas. So much for the Kremlin's so-called peaceful intentions, right? There is a footage of a direct hit by a Russian Shahed drone on a residential building in Kyiv. Not a military target, not a strategic facility, a multi-story apartment building where civilians live. Why did the Russian occupiers attack it? To kill as many civilians as possible. So what do you think? Is Trump disappointed in Putin again, or does he still see him as a good guy? This is what Kyiv's metro underground looked like last night. People sheltering underground with their pets, some even in tents, hiding from Russian drones and missiles. The air raid alert lasted 4 hours and 23 minutes. Before the night attack, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy spoke about how Russia can be forced to stop its terror. In his evening address, he said the following.
Lower prices for Russian oil, strong global sanctions, and the continuation of all other forms of pressure. This is what can convince even such a stubborn person. Putin keeps waging war as long as he has money. Money to buy loyalty, both from his inner circle and from the Russian population, and at the same time to pay for killings on the front line. And over this year, a lot has already been done to make sure the Russian war machine has less money.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian drones paid a visit to the Stavrolen petrochemical plant in Russia's Stavropol region. This is a large facility belonging to the Lukoil group. Its products are used by the Russian army, making Stavrolen a fully legitimate target. Overall, strikes by Ukraine's defense forces are becoming increasingly effective.
Ukrainian defenders continue to destroy the enemy not only at the front, but also behind enemy lines.
Film it.
I'm just filming right now. Get away from me!
Ukraine's special operations forces have their own tactics. They skillfully attack Russian ships in unexpected locations to confuse the enemy and prevent them from reacting. In the Caspian Sea, the patrol ship Okhotnik, which the Russians used for guarding and patrolling, was only able to shoot down a few drones. All of this happened near a drilling platform at the Filonovskoye oil and gas field, which also came under attack from Ukraine. And while the Russian Ministry of Defense makes loud statements about shooting things down, military facilities in the Russian Federation continue to burn. A large fire broke out at a military airfield of the aggressor state in the Lipetsk region. As a result of a successful sabotage, 2 expensive Russian Federation combat aircraft, a Su-30 and a Su-27, were destroyed.
Su-27, Su-27M and Su-30. These are new aircraft, which is why this location was chosen and, well, 2 planes were destroyed, at the very least.
As it turned out, this was the work of Ukrainian intelligence. And the operation itself was carried out by a representative of the resistance movement. The patrol routes, schedules, and guard shifts were studied. They entered the facility quietly and struck the Sukhois right inside the protective hangar.
Our intelligence is working very well. That is, for example, there's no need to send in our own teams. Contacts are established, meaning they find people who care. And then for specific tasks and with specific funding, they carry out these kinds of actions. In other words, this leads to a reduction in the combat potential of Russian aviation, which is exactly what we need.
The approximate total value of the 2 damaged fighter jets that Russia used in attacks on Ukraine could be up to $100 million. The SBU also orchestrated an explosive night at the Belbek airfield in Crimea. Several advanced S-400 and Panzer S-2 radar stations were completely destroyed.
As soon as we got long-range strike capabilities, the Russians started to lack enough surface-to-air missile systems. At first, they pulled their aircraft out of Crimea a few years ago, but then they brought them back again. So first they set up an air defense system, a fairly dense one, and started covering the Kerch Bridge with air defense. Naturally, they mainly deployed these systems at airfields, including Belbek, which is used primarily for placing radars and surface-to-air missile systems, plus some aircraft as well. So almost all of the tactical aviation is stationed there, plus army aviation as well. They bring in additional forces there for specific tasks, especially to intercept our drones. Army aviation and helicopters are also stationed there. The helicopter crews are fully utilized for cover missions, at least against drones. But of course, they can't hide from missiles.
There in Sevastopol, 2 more Su-27 fighter jets and the control tower were hit. This successful operation will complicate flight management for the occupying army. One of the planes was already prepared for takeoff.
They now fully understand that we can reach their airfields, and I think that eventually, after losing about a dozen aircraft over the next few months, they'll pull their aviation out of Crimea again and move it back to mainland Russia.
No fewer than 5 explosions were heard in the Krasnodar region. Residents heard the hum of engines in the sky from passing drones and saw bright flashes. After the series of explosions, authorities reported a fire at the pipeline. Before that, the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed to have successfully shot down 35 drones.
The manipulator got a little overheated.
The Taman seaport operates in the village of Volna. Taman is home to terminals for transshipment of petroleum products and liquefied hydrocarbon gas.
In the village of Volna, Temryuk district, 2 piers and 2 vessels were damaged as a result of the drone attack. Operational headquarters of Krasnodar Krai.
The authorities of the Russian Federation stated that the fires broke out at the piers. The area of the fire ranged from 1 to 1,500 square meters. A series of explosions was heard near the oil refinery in Slavyansk on Kuban, which had already been attacked a couple of days earlier. Ukrainian defenders are doing everything possible to inflict the greatest possible damage on the aggressor's army. They are aided by resistance within enemy territory, which effectively opposes the Putin regime and seeks to stop the war.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. Now's the time to subscribe, like this video and share it so more people can see it. Thank you, and glory to Ukraine. The Ukrainian troops in Myrnohrad are in what officials describe as operational encirclement. This was stated by Roman Kostenko, Secretary of the Parliamentary Committee on National Security, Defense and Intelligence. Unlike a tactical encirclement, where the enemy fully blocks movement and controls the area, operational one means you can still maneuver within the space that has been closed around you. More details on what is happening along the front line in the report.
Minus $100 million for the Russian army. That's the estimated scale of losses from the operation by Ukraine's GUR, during which the Russians were relieved of Su-30 and Su-27 fighter jets stationed at an airfield near Lipetsk, Russia. Ukrainian intelligence operatives spent only 2 weeks on the operation. Late at night from December 21st to 22nd, new explosions rocked the Krasnodar region. The explosions occurred in the village of Volna. It is reported that drones attacked the Taman seaport. The strike damaged a pipeline at one of the terminals. A fire also broke out.
According to the operational headquarters of the Krasnodar region, 2 piers and 2 vessels were damaged as a result of the drone attack.
Senator Lindsey Graham stated that the United States should provide Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles if the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin refuses a peace agreement.
This is an element of military political pressure on the Russian Federation. It should be noted that the United States has not stopped providing Ukraine with intelligence data for even an hour, nor with expanded military technical assistance.
Telegram channels are publishing information about the American electronic reconnaissance aircraft, the Bombardier Artemis. According to the information provided, it took off from the Mihail Kogalnicianu airfield in Romania and is conducting reconnaissance over the Black Sea.
The successful strike by Ukraine's defense forces on the submarine in the port of Novorossiysk is, first and foremost, an element of a joint operation with our strategic partners. The point is that at the moment the maritime drone strike was carried out, an American long-range radar surveillance aircraft was spotted in the sky over Crimea.
The reconnaissance range of the Bombardier Artemis II aircraft is 600 kilometers. It can detect certain objects, radar stations, communication stations, as far as Rostov-on-Don, Donetsk and Kherson. On the night of December 22nd, the Russians attacked Odessa, Ukraine. The Institute for the Study of War reports that the occupiers have become more active in the north of Sumy and Kharkiv regions, carrying out limited cross-border attacks there.
This is the so-called 1,000 cuts tactic, meaning simultaneous strikes in several directions to divert the operational reserves of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine away from the main direction of the Russian offensive. And here we have the Donetsk region, Pokrovsk, Kostiantynivka and Liman directions.
On Sunday, December 21st, Deep State analysts reported that the occupiers had captured the village of Zvanivka in the Donetsk region. A striking elimination of a war criminal, Russia has confirmed the death of Major General Fanil Savarov, head of operational training for the Russian armed forces, who took part in combat operations in Chechnya, Syria and Ukraine. The Russian investigative committee has already, so to speak, found those responsible and, as usual, is considering the version involving Ukrainian special services.
Over the past 24 hours, Russia has lost at least 1,420 troops killed and wounded. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, total Russian losses have now reached 1,199,280 soldiers. In the last day alone, the Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 8 Russian tanks, 20 armored combat vehicles, 23 artillery systems and dozens of other units of enemy military equipment. A grim forecast from the head of Ukraine's military intelligence, Lieutenant General Kyrylo Budanov. According to him, Putin's army could attack the Baltic states and carry out separate strikes against Poland. When could this happen and under what circumstances? Details next.
As early as 2027, Russia may attack the Baltic states and attempt to occupy them. This statement was made in a recent interview by the head of Ukrainian intelligence, Kyrylo Budanov.
According to the main plan, the Russian Federation was supposed to be ready to begin actions in 2030. Now, the plans have been adjusted and revised to shorten the timeline to 2027. About this,
a scenario and timeline like this was recently reported by Reuters, citing its sources in US intelligence services.
According to 6 sources familiar with US intelligence information, American intelligence reports continue to warn that Russian President Vladimir Putin has not abandoned his goals of seizing all of Ukraine and reclaiming parts of Europe. According to the sources, their views largely coincide with those of European leaders and intelligence agencies, that he is eager to seize all of Ukraine and the territories of former Soviet bloc countries, including members of the NATO alliance.
The so-called special military operation has been going according to plan for the 4th year now. There have been no significant successes. Sanctions are increasing more and more. Russians are getting poorer and poorer. That's why the Baltic countries as a new enemy are the perfect option.
Why the Baltic countries? Because in Ukraine, Russia can no longer achieve any strategic success by military means. But the Baltic countries are small and pressed up against the sea. That is, logistics play a much smaller role there. And accordingly, the opportunities to destroy this logistics and Russia's vulnerabilities are much less. There's no need to drive tanks across the entire country.
Previously, Moscow had planned to attack the Baltic countries in 2030. However, at present, the timeline has been shortened In addition to Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia, according to the Kremlin's plan, Poland is considered solely as a target for strikes during the military campaign. Not for occupation. Putin wants to prove to the whole world that Russia is an empire.
For an empire, or rather for those who see themselves as an empire, to develop, you always have to move somewhere to expand your influence and territory. By the way, that's the answer to many questions. To the north, there's only the Arctic and the Northern Oceans, and then, going around, America. That's not an option because it would be painful. To the east is the Pacific Ocean. And again, America. The answer is the same. To the south, China would be an absolute catastrophe. A land border would mean the same conditions as we have now in the war with the Russian Federation, only for them. That leaves only the Western world, which, in their view, pardon the expression, is utterly spoiled, deeply sick, quite weak, and truly indecisive. On D-Day, over 100 terrorist attacks are carried out across Europe, and at the same time, Russian military equipment advances toward the Baltic NATO countries. Plus, they cut communication cables and they jam GPS. That's what they were testing over the Baltic to throw everyone off track. And then supposedly from Vilnius, they say they're ready to stop the hostilities.
Despite peace talks on Ukraine, the Baltic countries, Poland and all European NATO members must prepare for a possible attack by Russia. In this case, Ukraine must continue its struggle for survival. There simply are no other options.
And finally, about a state that restricts internet access for its own citizens. Yes, Russia, now allegedly planning to restrict it for others as well. Russian engineers are reportedly working in secret, not secret anymore, on a weapon capable of destroying Starlink satellites in space.
How do you like that, Elon Musk? Russia is developing weapons to destroy satellites, Starlink in space. This was reported by the Associated Press, citing sources in NATO.
Two intelligence agencies from NATO countries suspect that Russia is developing new anti-satellite weapons designed to target satellite constellations. Elon Musk's Starlink, with devastating orbital clouds of debris, as a means of restricting the West's superiority in space, which has helped Ukraine on the battlefield.
War in space and the destruction of American satellites. This is one of Putin's scare tactics, which the Russian dictator has been using almost since the very beginning of the war.
Components of civilian infrastructure in space provided to Ukraine for military purposes may become a legitimate target for retaliatory strikes, according to the Russian Foreign Ministry.
Earlier, at the beginning of 2024, the work of Russian engineers on space weapons caused concern for the previous American administration. At that time, the discussion was about a nuclear explosion in space, as well as SE-500 systems capable of destroying missiles and spacecraft in low Earth orbit.
US President Joe Biden ordered to establish contact with Moscow. This is related to the anti-satellite potential that Russia is developing.
It is reported that the principle of operation of the new Russian weapon is based on dispersal. Hundreds of thousands of high-density spherical elements are scattered into Starlink's orbits, which are supposed to disable several of Musk's satellites at once. But here, military experts have a number of questions about this type of weapon.
Starlink orbits are at an altitude of about 550 kilometers. That's 340 miles above the planet. And it's quite remarkable that the Chinese space station Tiangong and the International Space Station of the occupying countries operate at lower orbits.
Essentially, without damaging their own Chinese satellites, the Russians can't reach the Starlinks. Moreover, the way Elon Musk's satellites work is that if one of them is destroyed, the signal quickly switches to another.
At the moment in orbit, there are about 10,000 Starlink satellites launched. So physically neutralizing the entire number of Starlink satellites is practically impossible.
At the same time, one should not underestimate the threat of a potential struggle by the axis of evil countries against Western satellites. After all, alongside Russia, other countries are also developing their own means to counter space-based communication and internet sources. In the Celestial Empire,
we have carefully reviewed your proposals. In
late November, Chinese scientists modeled a scenario for large-scale suppression of the Starlink satellite network in the Taiwan region. According to their calculations, to create a sort of electromagnetic shield over the entire territory of the island, about 1,000 drones equipped with special jamming devices would be needed.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders, glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. See you next time.